as you all know, we are at war. I woke up yesterday morning and I found out we just attacked Iran, so the United States and Israel, and we're doing it for Israel. We have no strategic value in this attack. There were negotiations that were taking place, and we decided to basically throw them out the door like we did last time. So the Iranians, who were willing to give up a lot, according to the news that was going on with the Oman foreign minister talking about this, they were willing to give up full enrichment storage, and we decided to bomb them. I want to talk about and analyze Trump's speech that he made. So let's take a look at it right now.
For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror.
So in this speech, Trump makes three claims that are lies or disinformation, which is what leaders do when they want to go to war, right? They try to convince the public through disinformation that the enemy is so bad, we dehumanize him, he's an evil, or she is, he's an evil, evil character, a Hitler incarnated, that we have to go destroy him because he's going to destroy the United States and civilization if we don't. So the first claim was in 1979, the Iranian revolutionaries seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took a number of American hostages. So why did they do that? Well, I'm going to talk about the history of that, because nothing happens in a vacuum. The second thing that Trump said was the barrack bombings of the USS Marine Barracks in Beirut in 1983. And he also lied about that, saying that Iran was responsible for that, which is untrue. And I'll tell you why. I'll go into the history briefly. And then finally, in 2000, he talks about the USS Cole being bombed, and he says either Iran had a hand in it or it knew about it. Both lies. Did the Iranians know about it? Perhaps they did. Maybe they didn't. The Israelis knew about 9/11. They were tracking the Al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States before the Trade Center bombings. So should we bomb Israel now? Of course not. Because the Israelis are the driving force behind U.S. policy in the Middle East. So we're not going to bomb them. I mean, if we were going to bomb the Israelis, we would have bombed them. We would have attacked them back in 1967 when they attacked the USS Liberty and they killed a number of U.S. personnel. So 1979 actually has a history going back to 1953. In 1953, the United States, Great Britain, and Israel decided that the Prime Minister of Iran had to go because he nationalized the Anglo-Iranian oil fields. So the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was both a jointly owned company between Britain and Iran. By the way, this later becomes BP. And the reason Mohammad Mossadegh, the Prime Minister of Iran, decided to nationalize them at the time was because he thought it would be only fair if the British shared the wealth of that oil, and the British refused to do so. And that led to Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, meeting with Dwight Eisenhower and convincing him, It was not Netanyahu this time or the Israelis, but it was the British, convincing him that this guy is a socialist, he's crazy, we have to overthrow him. And Eisenhower was convinced, so he sends the CIA under the leadership of Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the turn of the 20th century. So in comes Roosevelt, smuggles his way into Iran, goes to the U.S. Embassy, 2 suitcases of money, and he convinces certain politicians and military leaders that Mossadegh had to go. And so Mossadegh is eventually arrested and put on trial and eventually is put in jail. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, comes in now as absolute ruler. Before this, he had to share power with parliament, the Majlis as the Iranians called it. But now he had absolute power. From 1953 to 1979, he's abusing his power, stealing the wealth of Iran and using it for his own benefit and filling the coffers of those cronies who are around him, the ones who are in exile right now in Beverly Hills and in Canada, whose children went marching as pro-monarchists who wanted to reinstall his son. The last time he was in Iran was in 1979 when he fled with his dad. And they want to reinstall him now as the leader of Iran. They want to bring back the monarchy. Now, Iranians don't want a monarchy. They want a system. They want to change the system, but they don't want a monarchy to come back. So he's abusing his power, arresting dissidents, killing many Iranians in the process as well. Many Iranians are arrested by the Savak, the secret police of Iran, because they spoke something against the Shah. And so they come back home, either they go to jail or they come back home injured with some sort of life-changing injury or in a body bag. And this all eventually climaxes to 1978 when the revolution breaks out in the streets. People go out in the streets and they start to protest, and eventually the protests turn to full-blown revolution and the Shah flees Iran. The guy who's leading this revolution from afar, Ayatollah Khomeini, as you see here on the plane, comes back and declares the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, some of the revolutionaries decided to attack the U.S. Embassy, and they seized a number of Americans, as Trump pointed out. And why did they do that? Why did they seize the U.S. Embassy? And again, as I explained, it's that very embassy as a symbol not only of America, but also a symbol of the corruption of the CIA and the U.S. foreign policy that led to the overthrow of their democracy. So America becomes the America becomes the big Satan, and eventually Israel becomes the small Satan. I guess you could add Britain to that too, but the British have declined and really don't have a lot of stakes in Iran or the Middle East today. They just follow everything the United States tells them to. Just like yesterday when their leader went out and said, I support this attack by the United States on Iran, even though it's an aggression. Then the Republicans will start crying later on when Trump decides to seize Greenland. And they'll cry foul. Oh no, you can't do that. That's against international law. As if international law means anything. I guess it only means something when the West is being attacked by the West. So, fast forward to 1983 in the Marine Corps Barracks bombing. And this has a long history as well. It actually goes back to the 1950s too, with the way the government was set up by the French. I'm not going to go into details about that. But by the 1970s, this comes to a boiling point, and eventually we see a civil war breaking out in Lebanon. The civil war continues, and a low-level civil war in the 70s, but eventually by the early 80s, it's going to be a full-blown one. And you have different factions. You have Sunnis who make up about 85% of Muslims. You have Shia who make up about 15% of Muslims. So those are the two main sects in Islam. There are smaller sects, but those are the two main ones. So you have Sunnis on one side, Shias on one side, Christians on one side, and the Christians were also broken up to factions, so the Christians are fighting each other. You have Syria now coming into Lebanon and also getting involved, and eventually Israel comes in to get involved because the Palestinians are there. Refugees, by the way, from 1948, because Israel ethnically cleansed them from their homeland. The Israelis ethnically cleansed them from their homeland, so they're in Lebanon, and of course Israel hates refugees, so eventually Israelis make things even worse by getting involved. And now the United States decides to get involved, and President Ronald Reagan sends in the U.S. Marines. So now the U.S. Marines are coming in as peacekeepers, but Reagan decides to side with the Israelis and their factions against the other factions. And that leads to Amal, the Shia organization, targeting the U.S., and of course that leads to the Barracks bombings where 230 Marines were killed. He said that Iran had a stake in that. It was an Iranian proxy. That's a lie, too. Amal was actually formed before the 1979 revolution. So there goes that lie. And then finally, we go to the 2000 bombing of the USS Cole, which was done by a group known as Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. The same group that conducted the 9/11 bombings, the World Trade Center bombings on 9/11. And Al-Qaeda was formed, goes back to the 1970s also, formed when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. The CIA is involved in this. I'll do a separate video on this, on how the CIA got involved, and how Al-Qaeda and its leader, Osama bin Laden, who were trained by the CIA, led to, of course, 9/11. But in the 1990s, because the United States had withdrawn from Afghanistan, and basically abandoned that country instead of rebuilding it after that long war from 1979 to 1989. We abandoned it, and instead of rebuilding it, we left it to the different factions, and Al-Qaeda was one of those factions that took refuge in Afghanistan, and again led by Osama bin Laden. And throughout the 90s, Al-Qaeda attacked the United States. They attacked the World Trade Center bombing, the World Trade Center in 1993. That's the first bombing, which failed. And attacked the United States in Africa. They blew up 2 U.S. embassies, one in Nairobi, Kenya, and one in Dar es Salaam. And then eventually this leads to the USS Cole bombing in 2000. And Trump says either they knew about it or they participated in it. And again, Al-Qaeda is a Sunni group, and they come from a small faction within the Sunni group known as Wahhabis or Salafiyah, who are more related to Trump's ally, Saudi Arabia, than they are to Shia Islam. But we're not going to attack Saudi Arabia, will we? So there goes that lie. And finally, as I close today, I want to talk about the other parts of the speech where he talks about not only do the Iranians have to get rid of their nuclear program, but they also have to get rid of their ballistic missiles. They have to get rid of their proxies. We're going to destroy their navy, he says, and eventually probably their army. So we want total disarmament of Iran, unconditional surrender. The last time the United States had unconditional surrender was World War II. That's the last war, major war that we won. After that, it was downhill. By the way, after that, we also recognized Israel. Does that have something to do with our downturn in our military effectiveness, or ineffectiveness, I should say? Korean War, stalemate. Vietnam, loss. The evacuation of Saigon. 1983, Marine Corps Barracks, as we discussed, peacekeeping mission, turns into a disaster. 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War. Iraq was our proxy. We sold them chemical weapons that they used against the Iranians. And that was sort of a stalemate. sort of almost lost that war. But it was a stalemate. Neither side wins. In the 1990s, the first Gulf War, 2003, the second Gulf War, Afghanistan. These are all losses. So we don't know how to win anymore. And now the United States has this sort of new strategy of fighting wars, where the wars are going to be not forever wars, but short wars, sort of like Venezuela, or we'll hit Iran like we did in 2025, then we'll hit them again today, we'll hit them again in another year, and then we'll hit them again, eventually, and eroding them. But I'll talk more about this later on, and this new strategy that the United States has come up with is actually not a new strategy. It's something that the Israelis have been doing for years and years. And I'll talk about this in another video. But that's it for today, so thanks for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Also the notifications. I will start to post videos as often as I could. I do work. I am a professor of history and international relations, so I have other things to do. But in my free time, in my spare time, I will post videos, and especially when there's international emergencies like this, because this is my thing, I will post videos almost daily if I can. Thank you.